In the fast-paced world of television news, respect isn't always given freely. When a young anchor decided to mock Shannon Bream's age during what should have been a routine network meeting, nobody expected what would happen next. The room fell, completely silent after Shannon's response, a moment that would change the dynamic of their newsroom forever. Comment where you're watching from today as we dive into this powerful story. The Fox News headquarters in New York City buzzed with activity on that fateful Wednesday morning. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the conference room on the 44th floor, casting a golden glow across the polished mahogany table where the network's brightest stars gathered for their quarterly meeting. The air was thick, with the scent of fresh coffee and ambition, that unique blend of determination and anxiety that permeates any room where careers can be made or broken in an instant. Shannon Bream sat quietly at the corner of the table, reviewing her notes with practiced precision. At 53, she carried herself with the quiet confidence that comes from decades of experience in an industry known for chewing up and spitting out even the most talented journalists. Her blonde hair was styled in her signature bob, her outfit impeccably professional. A navy blue blazer over a cream blouse that complemented her eyes, which, despite the early hour, were alert and observant. Those eyes had seen the rise and fall of countless news personalities over her 20-plus years in the business. Unlike many of her colleagues who commanded attention the moment they entered a room, Shannon preferred to listen before speaking. This quality had served her well throughout her career, allowing her to gather information others might miss in their rush to be heard. She had climbed the ladder from local news in Charlotte to the Supreme Court beat at Fox through persistence, intelligence, and a work ethic that had become legendary among the production staff. What few people knew was that behind her polished exterior lay a woman who had overcome significant challenges. Failed attempts at other careers, countless rejections, and the constant pressure to remain relevant in an industry obsessed with youth. The network executives filed in first, followed by the anchors and correspondents who made up the public face of the channel. William Hayes, the network president, took his position at the head of the table, his presence commanding immediate respect. To his right sat Aaron Brooks, the programming director, whose decisions shaped the careers of everyone in the room. These were people accustomed to power, to having their opinions matter. Among the last to arrive was Adam Schmidt, the network's newest rising star. At just 34, he had been recruited from a competing network after his viral interviews with several controversial political figures had generated millions of views. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his smile practiced to show just the right amount of teeth, and his charcoal suit tailored to emphasize his athletic build. Adam carried himself with the unmistakable swagger of someone who believed his talent was unmatched. He had been at Fox for less than 6 months, but already the whispers about his ambition had reached every corner of the building. "Good morning, everyone," Hayes began, silencing the murmurs around the table. "We've got a packed agenda today, so let's get started. First, I want to congratulate the entire team on our ratings this quarter. We've maintained our lead in primetime and made significant gains in the morning slot." Appreciative nods circulated the room as Hayes continued detailing the network's performance metrics. Shannon jotted down notes, occasionally glancing up to observe her colleagues' reactions. When Hayes announced a new initiative focusing on digital content aimed at younger viewers, she noticed Adam Schmidt straighten in his chair, a look of keen interest crossing his face. "As part of this initiative," Hayes continued, "we'll be reshuffling some assignments to best utilize our talents. I'd like each of you to share your thoughts on where you see opportunities for growth." One by one, the anchors offered their perspectives. Benjamin Gardner spoke about expanding international coverage. Michelle Freeman suggested more in-depth investigative pieces. When Shannon's turn came, she spoke clearly and concisely. I believe there's significant potential in expanding our legal analysis beyond breaking news, she said. With the upcoming Supreme Court session addressing several landmark cases, we have an opportunity to provide our viewers with comprehensive, accessible explanations of complex legal issues that will directly impact their lives. Hayes nodded appreciatively. Excellent point, Shannon. Your background as an attorney brings a valuable perspective to our coverage. And her experience certainly gives her a unique historical view. Adam interjected with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Shannon remembers covering Supreme Court cases that some of our younger viewers only read about in history books. A momentary hush fell over the room. The comment hung in the air, not overtly disrespectful, but carrying an unmistakable subtext. Adam's implication was clear. Shannon was old news, a relic in an industry increasingly dominated by youth. Several eyes darted to Shannon, gauging her reaction to the thinly veiled dig. Shannon's expression remained unchanged, her posture steady as she met Adam's gaze directly. Not a flicker of emotion crossed her face, though those who knew her well might have noticed the slight tightening of her grip on her pen. The tension in the room was palpable as everyone waited for her response. "Thank you for that observation, Adam," she replied, her voice measured and calm. "You're right that experience provides perspective. I've been fortunate to witness many significant legal moments firsthand." Hayes, sensing the undercurrent of tension, quickly moved the conversation forward, but the dynamic had shifted. Throughout the remainder of the meeting, Adam continued making subtle references to fresh approaches and modern perspectives, while glancing meaningfully in Shannon's direction. Each comment was carefully crafted to position himself as the future while relegating Shannon to the past. As the meeting progressed to discussing upcoming special coverage, Adam seized another opportunity. For our election night coverage planning, we should consider what will appeal to younger demographics. The data shows they connect better with anchors they relate to, anchors who understand their cultural references and lifestyle. His gaze slid meaningfully toward Shannon. No offense. To our more seasoned team members, Chelsea Johnson, a producer in her early 40s, frowned slightly at Adam's comment but remained silent. Brett Perry, another anchor, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The discomfort in the room was growing with each thinly veiled jab. Through it all, Shannon maintained her composure, her face a mask of professional attentiveness. When she spoke, it was only to add substantive comments about coverage strategies, never acknowledging the increasingly obvious attempts to undermine her. As the meeting neared its conclusion, Hayes opened the floor for final thoughts on the upcoming town hall events the network would be hosting. We need our strongest communicators for these. They're high-profile opportunities to showcase our talent. "I'd be happy to take the lead on this," Adam said immediately. "My interview style resonates with audiences looking for dynamic exchanges rather than, shall we say, more traditional approaches." He cast a sidelong glance at Shannon. "We need to show viewers that we're forward-thinking, not stuck in outdated formats that might feel comfortable to those who've been in the business for decades." The implication was impossible to miss. A few uncomfortable glances were exchanged around the table. Amanda Gutierrez, one of the senior producers, frowned visibly at Adam's boldness. Even Hayes seemed taken aback by the increasingly transparent attacks. Shannon closed her notebook slowly, placed her pen beside it with deliberate care, and looked directly at Adam. The room fell silent as everyone sensed the moment had arrived. Shannon, Bream, known for her poise and professionalism, was finally going to address the repeated jabs at her age. "Adam," she began, her voice carrying the same warm, authoritative tone that had earned her the trust of millions of viewers. "I'd like to share something with you and everyone here." All eyes were now fixed on Shannon. Adam maintained his confident smile, clearly expecting some defensive response that would only confirm his narrative about her being past her prime. "When I was starting out in this business," Shannon continued, "I was told repeatedly that I wouldn't make it, that I was too nice, too southern, not aggressive enough. I was rejected from more positions than I can count. I worked overnight shifts while putting myself through law school. I drove between cities to cover stories when I couldn't afford a hotel room." She paused, her eyes making contact with each person at the table. "What I learned through all of that wasn't just how to report the news. I learned how to listen, really listen, to people from all walks of life. I learned that credibility isn't given, it's earned through consistency, accuracy, and respect for your audience and colleagues." The room remained silent, captivated by her words and the quiet strength behind them. Adam's smile had begun to fade. "You're right that I've been in this industry for some time," Shannon acknowledged with a slight nod in Adam's direction. "And in that time, I've seen many talented young anchors come through these doors. The ones who succeeded weren't necessarily the ones with the most natural on-camera presence or the most aggressive approach to climbing the ladder. They were the ones who understood that in journalism, as in life, there are no shortcuts to earning trust." Shannon smiled slightly, the warmth reaching her eyes. "I was once the youngest person in rooms like this, eager to prove myself. I made mistakes, including underestimating the value of those with more experience. What I didn't understand then was that in this business, your age isn't nearly as important as your ability to connect with people and tell their stories with integrity." She turned her attention directly to Adam, whose smug expression had completely vanished. "So yes, Adam, I do have historical perspective. I've covered 5 presidential elections, 3 wars, countless Supreme Court decisions, and interviewed everyone from world leaders to everyday heroes. That perspective isn't a liability, it's an asset that allows me to provide context our viewers value. The ratings for my show among the 25 to 54 demographic, which I believe you're so concerned about, reflect that." The silence in the room was deafening. Aaron Brooks, the programming director, was staring at Shannon with newfound respect. Hayes looked impressed and slightly relieved that she had handled the situation with such grace. Even the executives, who had been absorbed in their tablets throughout much of the meeting, were now fully engaged. Adam Schmidt sat frozen, the color slowly draining from his face as he realized his miscalculation. He had expected Shannon to react emotionally, defensively. Instead, she had responded with wisdom and dignity that made his comments seem petty and unprofessional by comparison. "Now," Shannon said, her voice returning to its usual professional tone, "regarding the town halls, I think we should consider a panel approach that showcases various perspectives and experiences. I'd be happy to work with Adam and others to create a format that serves our viewers across all demographics." With those words, Shannon effectively extended an olive branch while simultaneously establishing her authority. The power dynamic in the room had shifted dramatically. What had begun as an attempt to diminish her had instead highlighted precisely why Shannon Bream had endured and thrived in an industry where careers often burned bright but brief. Hayes cleared his throat. "Thank you, Shannon. That's exactly the kind of thoughtful approach we need." He glanced at Adam, whose confident demeanor had completely collapsed. "Let's move forward with that panel concept for the town halls. Shannon, would you take the lead on coordinating the team?" As the meeting adjourned, the conference room emptied quickly, leaving behind only the lingering tension and faint scent of coffee. Shannon gathered her materials unhurriedly, aware of the sidelong glances from colleagues as they filed out. Some offered subtle nods of approval, while others seemed eager to distance themselves from the uncomfortable exchange. Adam Schmidt was among the first to leave, his earlier swagger replaced by stiff movements and averted eyes. William Hayes approached Shannon as she organized her notes. "That was quite a moment," he said quietly, leaning against the table. "You handled it with remarkable grace." Shannon smiled slightly. "Thank you, William. It seemed like the right time for some perspective." "Indeed," Hayes replied, studying her with newfound appreciation. "Adam has talent, but he clearly has much to learn about respecting his colleagues." "We all have our learning curves," Shannon said diplomatically. "Mine was just a few decades earlier than his." Hayes chuckled, then grew serious. "Just so you know, I've already been approached about expanding your role in our election coverage. Your analysis resonates with viewers across demographics, something our young Mr. Schmidt might benefit from understanding." After Hayes departed, Shannon remained momentarily alone in the conference room, allowing herself a brief sigh, not of relief or frustration, but acknowledgement. This wasn't the first time she'd faced such challenges, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. The television news industry had always been a complex landscape to navigate, particularly for women, as they aged in a business that often valued youth over experience. The corridors of Fox News headquarters buzzed with activity as Shannon made her way back to her office. She nodded pleasantly to interns and executives alike, maintaining the same approachable demeanor she was known for, regardless of a person's position. Behind her, hushed conversations followed in her wake. Word of the conference room exchange, spreading rapidly through the building's efficient grapevine. Michelle Hendricks, a veteran producer who had worked with Shannon on several major stories, fell into step beside her. "Word travels fast around here," she said under her breath. "You've become the talk of the building in the last 15 minutes. Shannon raised an eyebrow. "I can only imagine the embellishments that have been added already." "They're saying you absolutely demolished Adam without raising your voice or saying a single unkind word," Michelle replied with undisguised admiration. "It's being called a masterclass in professional composure." "That seems excessive," Shannon remarked as they reached her office door. "I simply spoke honestly." "Well, your honesty made quite an impression," Michelle said, "especially on Jennifer Cox." Jennifer? Shannon paused, her hand on the doorknob. Jennifer Cox was the network's up-and-coming weekend anchor, often mentioned in the same breath as Adam Schmidt when executives discussed the future of the network. While talented and ambitious, Jennifer had maintained a certain distance from Shannon and other veteran female anchors. A not uncommon strategy for young women trying to carve their own path in a competitive environment. She was outside the conference room, waiting to use the space for her production meeting, Michelle explained. "Heard every word. She's been asking if you might have time to talk with her later today." This information gave Shannon pause. "Interesting. Let her know my door is open." Inside her office, Shannon took a moment to collect herself. The space reflected her personality, organized but warm, with carefully chosen mementos from significant stories she'd covered throughout her career. Law books lined one shelf, a nod to her background as an attorney. On another sat framed photographs, Shannon with Supreme Court justices, presidents, and, perhaps most treasured, with her mentors from earlier in her career. She had just settled at her desk to prepare for her afternoon broadcast when a knock came at her door. It was Chelsea Johnson, one of the mid-level producers who had been in the meeting. "Do you have a minute?" Chelsea asked, hovering uncertainly in the doorway. "Of course," Shannon gestured to the chair across from her desk. "What's on your mind?" Chelsea closed the door behind her and sat, fidgeting slightly with the lanyard of her ID badge. "I wanted to thank you for what you said in there. It wasn't just about Adam or about age." She hesitated, searching for the right words. "It was about respect and earning your place, rather than expecting it to be handed to you." Shannon observed the younger woman thoughtfully. Chelsea had been with the network for about 5 years, working diligently behind the scenes without much recognition. "I sense there's more to this conversation than appreciation for an awkward meeting moment." Chelsea smiled ruefully. Is it that obvious? She took a deep breath before continuing. The truth is, I've been struggling lately. I'm 42, and I've watched people a decade younger than me get promoted while I keep hitting walls. Sometimes I wonder if I'm already too old to move forward in this business. I understand that feeling, Shannon said, her voice softening. This industry can make 40 seem ancient, especially for women. But Chelsea, think about this. What unique perspective do you bring because of your experience? What stories can you tell more effectively because you've lived longer, seen more? That's just it, Chelsea replied. I'm not sure anymore. Watching Adam and others like him advance so quickly makes me question everything I've worked for. Shannon leaned forward slightly. Let me ask you something. When you produce a segment, what matters most to you? The flashy graphics and trending topics, or getting the facts right and telling the story with integrity? The latter, of course, Chelsea answered without hesitation. And where did you learn that prioritization? Was it innate, or did it develop? Over time, Chelsea considered this. Over time, definitely. Early in my career, I was much more focused on creating content that would get attention, regardless of substance. Exactly, Shannon nodded. That wisdom is your competitive advantage. Don't underestimate its value, especially in an era where trust in media is at an all-time low. Their conversation was interrupted by another knock. Jennifer Cox stood in the doorway, her expression a mixture of determination and uncertainty. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said. I can come back later. No need, Chelsea rose from her chair. We were just wrapping up. She turned back to Shannon. Thank you, truly. As Chelsea left, Jennifer remained hesitant at the threshold until Shannon gestured for her to enter. Unlike Chelsea's casual production attire, Jennifer was camera-ready in a tailored red dress, her dark hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless. At 36, she represented exactly what the network wanted to project. Polished, attractive, and young enough to appeal to coveted demographics while experienced enough to handle serious news. I hear you wanted to speak with me, Shannon said, motioning. To the now vacant chair, Jennifer sat, her posture perfect but tense. I overheard your exchange with Adam this morning, she began, coming directly to the point. It made me realize something I'm not particularly proud of. Shannon waited, giving Jennifer space to continue at her own pace. I've deliberately kept my distance from you and other women with longer careers here, Jennifer admitted, maintaining eye contact despite her obvious discomfort with the confession. I thought associating too closely with women of a different generation might undermine my own brand, that it might make executives see me as part of the past rather than the future. The candor was refreshing, if not entirely surprising to Shannon. That's a common strategy, she acknowledged without judgment. This business encourages women to see each other as competition rather than potential allies. But watching you today, the way you handled Adam with such dignity while he was being completely unprofessional, it made me question that approach, Jennifer continued. You didn't just defend yourself, you demonstrated exactly why experience matters. I realized I've been cutting myself off from valuable mentorship out of some misguided fear. Shannon smiled. It takes courage to recognize that, and even more, to acknowledge it directly. Thank you for your honesty. I guess what I'm asking is... Jennifer hesitated, then straightened her shoulders. Would you be willing to meet occasionally? Not formally, just to talk. There's so much I could learn from you about navigating this industry long-term. I'd be happy to, Shannon replied warmly. Though I should warn you, associating with me might indeed affect how some see you. Are you prepared for that possibility? Jennifer's response was immediate and firm. After today, I think I'd rather be associated with integrity and professionalism than whatever Adam represents. Their conversation was cut short by Shannon's phone buzzing with a text from her producer. A breaking news story was developing, and she was needed in the studio immediately. As Jennifer left, Shannon quickly gathered what she'd need for the broadcast, her mind already shifting to the task at hand. The Fox News studio was a flurry of activity when Shannon arrived. Technicians adjusted lighting while producers huddled around monitors, discussing the incoming information about a developing situation at the Supreme Court. Shannon moved efficiently through the preparation process, reviewing facts, consulting with legal experts on her team, making quick decisions about the angle they would take. This was where Shannon truly excelled, where her legal background and journalistic experience created a powerful combination. As she settled into the anchor chair and the countdown to broadcasting began, she caught sight of Adam Schmidt hovering near the production area, watching her with an unreadable expression. The red light on the camera illuminated, and Shannon delivered the breaking news with her characteristic combination of clarity and authority. The story involved complex constitutional questions surrounding a surprise ruling, exactly the type of coverage where her legal expertise proved invaluable. Without missing a beat, she provided context about precedent and potential implications that transformed what could have been a dry legal story into compelling television. From her position at the desk, Shannon could see various staff members gathered around monitors throughout the studio, nodding appreciatively at her analysis. Even Adam had moved closer, his earlier smugness replaced by what appeared to be reluctant fascination with her handling of the complicated material. When the broadcast concluded, Aaron Brooks, the programming director who had sat silently through the morning meeting, approached her. "That's exactly why you're irreplaceable, Shannon," he said, keeping his voice low. "The way you just broke down that ruling for viewers, that comes from years of expertise. No amount of youthful energy can substitute for that kind of knowledge." Shannon thanked him with a modest nod and gathered her notes. As she headed back to her office to prepare for her evening show, she passed Adam, who was now in conversation with several producers. Their eyes met briefly, and Shannon offered a small, professional smile before continuing on her way. Later that afternoon, as Shannon reviewed materials for her evening broadcast, she received an email from Hayes announcing changes to the town hall planning committee. Her name was listed as chair, with Adam Schmidt as a member, a clear message about the hierarchy. Shannon had mixed feelings about this development. While the recognition was appreciated, she had no desire to create an adversarial relationship with Adam or anyone else at the network. Shannon decided a direct approach was best. She found Adam in the research department, surrounded by printouts and looking uncharacteristically disheveled. "Do you have a moment?" she asked. Adam looked up, surprise flashing across his face before he composed himself. "Of course," he replied, his tone carefully neutral. "I wanted to touch base about the town hall planning," Shannon began, keeping her voice conversational. "I think we have an opportunity to create something truly valuable for viewers if we approach it collaboratively." Adam studied her warily, clearly trying to determine if this was some form of professional revenge. "You're not upset about heading the committee with me on it? After this morning?" "This isn't about this morning," Shannon replied simply. "It's about producing the best possible content for our audience. I meant what I said about different perspectives being valuable, including yours. You have insights about younger viewers that I don't, and I'd be foolish not to utilize that." The tension in Adam's shoulders eased slightly. I appreciate that, and I should apologize for my comments earlier. They were unprofessional." "Yes, they were," Shannon agreed, not unkindly. "But we all make mistakes. What matters is what we learn from them." The following weeks at Fox News headquarters took on a markedly different atmosphere. Word of Shannon's composed response to Adam's age-related jabs had spread throughout the building. evolving with each retelling until it had reached nearly mythical proportions. Junior staffers, who had never interacted with Shannon directly, now watched her with newfound admiration as she moved through the corridors. The respect she commanded had always been present, but it now carried an additional layer of reverence. For Shannon herself, little had changed in her daily approach. She arrived each morning with the same methodical preparation, treating everyone from security guards to network executives with equal courtesy. If she noticed the increased deference from colleagues, she gave no indication. Her focus remained where it had always been, on the stories that needed telling and the facts that required clear explanation. The Town Hall Planning Committee had met 3 times since the confrontation, with Shannon guiding the discussions with diplomatic skill. To his credit, Adam had shown up to each meeting prepared and engaged, his earlier condescension replaced by a more measured approach. Whether this represented genuine growth or merely strategic adaptation remained to be seen, but Shannon chose to take his efforts at face value. "I think we should consider Nashville for the Economic Policy Town Hall," Adam suggested during their 4th planning session. The mix of traditional industries and tech startups there could provide an interesting cross-section of perspectives. Shannon nodded thoughtfully. "That's an excellent point. Nashville also gives us geographic diversity, since we've already selected Phoenix for the Immigration Town Hall." As the meeting continued, Shannon noticed a subtle shift in Adam's demeanor when addressing her. Gone was the barely concealed disdain, replaced by something that, while not quite respect, at least approached professional courtesy. Progress, however incremental, was still progress. After the meeting adjourned, Jennifer Cox approached Shannon with a coffee in each hand, offering one to her. "Got a minute? I just received some interesting polling data about viewer trust that I thought you might want to see." They settled into Shannon's office, where Jennifer pulled up a presentation on her tablet. The network commissioned this research to better understand what drives viewer loyalty across different demographics. "Look at this breakdown." Shannon studied the charts with interest. The data showed that while younger viewers were initially drawn to broadcasts based on production values and anchor appearance, long-term loyalty was overwhelmingly tied to perceived trustworthiness and expertise. "This confirms what I've always believed," Shannon remarked. "Style might attract viewers, but substance keeps them." "Exactly," Jennifer agreed. "And look at this cross-reference with anchor retention rates." She swiped to another chart. The anchors with staying power aren't necessarily the youngest or most dynamic, but those who've established credibility with their audience. Shannon smiled slightly. "Is this your subtle way of providing me with ammunition against ageism in broadcasting?" Jennifer laughed. "Maybe not so subtle, but it's more than that. I've been thinking about career longevity since our conversation. The average tenure for women in prime anchor positions is still dismally short compared to men. I want to be the exception, not the rule." "A worthy goal," Shannon agreed, "though the landscape is slowly changing. When I started, there was an unspoken expiration date for women on camera, usually around 40. Now at least we're seeing more women in their 50s and beyond maintaining prominent positions." "Like you," Jennifer noted. "Like me," Shannon acknowledged. "Though it hasn't been without challenges." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Chelsea Johnson stood in the doorway, her expression tight with concern. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's something you both should see." She stepped into the office and placed her laptop on Shannon's desk, turning the screen so both women could view it. On display was a tweet from a popular media blogger known for insider gossip about television news. The post featured a candid photo of Shannon from that morning's broadcast with the caption, "Sources say Fox News executives discussing refresh of evening lineup." Is it time for some hosts to gracefully exit to make room for new blood? TV news. Nice. Media gossip. Shannon's expression remained neutral as she studied the post, but Jennifer's reaction was immediate and angry. This is ridiculous. Your ratings are consistently strong, and your legal analysis is unmatched in cable news. It's just gossip, Shannon said calmly, though both women noticed she didn't dismiss it outright. In their industry, such rumors often contained at least a kernel of truth, and even if there are discussions happening, that's the nature of television. Programming evolves. Chelsea closed her laptop with a decisive snap. Well, the timing seems suspicious. Right after you put Adam in his place, suddenly there are sources talking about refreshing the lineup. Shannon considered this. It would be a mistake to assume correlation equals causation. Network decisions are typically driven by numbers, not personal vendettas. Usually, Jennifer agreed, but we all know personalities and politics play a role too. She hesitated before adding, "There's something else you should know. I overheard Adam talking with Brett Perry yesterday. He mentioned having dinner with Thomas Hayes last weekend." Thomas Hayes, the network president's son? Shannon asked, her interest piqued despite her attempt at detachment. The same, Jennifer confirmed. Apparently they were college roommates. Adam was implying he has a direct line to William Hayes through Thomas. This information cast the situation in a different light. William Hayes had always struck Shannon as fair-minded and professional, but family connections could complicate even the most straightforward business relationships. Still, Shannon was reluctant to jump to conclusions. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," she advised. Gossip blogs need constant content, and suggesting veteran anchors might be replaced generates reliable clicks. I've been the subject of retirement rumors at least annually for the past 5 years. Chelsea and Jennifer exchanged glances, neither looking entirely convinced by Shannon's measured response. Before they could press further, Shannon's phone buzzed with a message from her producer. She was needed in the studio to record a segment for the network's digital platforms. "Duty calls," Shannon said, rising from her chair. "Let's keep this in perspective. If there are legitimate concerns about my position, I'm confident Hayes will discuss them with me directly. Until then, we all have jobs to do." As Shannon headed toward the studio, her outward composure belied the subtle unease she felt. While she had faced professional uncertainty before, the landscape of television news had changed dramatically in recent years. Networks were increasingly desperate to capture younger viewers, and despite her strong ratings, Shannon knew that demographics mattered to advertisers. The studio was quiet when she arrived, with only a skeleton crew preparing for the digital segment. Adam Schmidt stood near the main camera, engaged in conversation with Caleb Ritter, one of the network's digital content directors. They fell silent as Shannon approached, exchanging glances that immediately raised her suspicions. Shannon. Perfect. Good timing, Caleb said with forced cheerfulness. We're just finalizing the format for this segment. Anything I should know before we begin? Shannon asked, her gaze moving between the two men. Actually, Adam interjected, we've had a slight change of plans. The executives thought it might be good to have both of us handle this segment, a sort of generational perspective on the Supreme Court's upcoming term. Shannon raised an eyebrow. This was the first she'd heard of any format change, and the fact that it came through Adam rather than her producer suggested an end run around normal protocols. Interesting. And when was this decision made? This morning, Adam replied smoothly. Hayes thought it would showcase our complementary expertise, your legal background, and my focus on how these cases impact younger Americans. Shannon nodded slowly, maintaining her professional demeanor, despite her growing certainty that larger forces were at work. Of course! Whatever serves our viewers best. As they took their positions at the desk, Shannon subtly observed the production team. Several were avoiding eye contact, a telling sign that something unusual was happening. When the segment began, Shannon immediately noticed that the questions directed to her focused narrowly on historical context, while Adam was given the opportunity to discuss implications and forward-looking analysis, the more dynamic and engaging aspects of the conversation. Nevertheless, Shannon handled each question with her characteristic thoroughness and clarity, occasionally expanding her answers to include perspectives that the narrowly framed questions seemed designed to exclude. If this was indeed a test, she had no intention of failing it due to artificial constraints. When the recording concluded, Caleb reviewed the footage with obvious satisfaction. "That worked well. The contrast between your approaches really came through." "Contrast?" Shannon inquired mildly. "You know," Caleb gestured vaguely, suddenly aware of potential subtext. "Different analytical styles." Adam gathered his notes with a satisfied smile. "I think viewers will appreciate seeing multiple generations of legal analysis. It demonstrates the network's commitment to diverse perspectives." Shannon met his gaze directly. "Indeed, though diverse perspectives can come from many sources beyond just age difference, experience across different legal specialties, regional backgrounds, educational paths, all contribute to analytical diversity." Adam's smile faltered slightly. "Of course, I simply meant, I know exactly what you meant," Shannon interrupted, her voice pleasant but firm. "And I appreciate the opportunity to demonstrate that legal insight doesn't expire with age. It often deepens." As Shannon left the studio, she found Daniel Miller, her longtime producer, waiting in the hallway. His expression confirmed her suspicions that something unusual was occurring behind the scenes. "Walk with me," she suggested, and they moved toward a quieter area of the building. "That segment wasn't my idea," Daniel said immediately, his loyalty evident. "They bypassed me completely. I only found out when the studio crew was being assembled." "I figured as much," Shannon replied. "The question is why? Is this an isolated incident or part of a pattern?" Daniel hesitated before answering. "There have been meetings, executive level, very hush-hush. Nothing official has filtered down, but there's talk about modernizing certain time slots." "My time slot?" Shannon asked directly. "Possibly," Daniel admitted. "But Shannon, your ratings are solid. If they're considering changes, it's not because of performance issues." Shannon absorbed this information with the same measured approach she applied to breaking news stories, assessing facts, considering sources, analyzing implications. "Who's driving these discussions? Hayes?" "Not directly. Aaron Brooks seems to be the one pushing hardest," Daniel revealed. "But there's another factor you should know about. Wilson Media Group has expressed interest in acquiring a significant stake in the network. This was indeed significant news. Wilson Media Group was known for its aggressive approach to programming, often favoring provocative content and younger on-air talent over substance and experience." "How far along are these discussions?" Shannon asked. "Nothing's finalized, but serious enough that programming decisions are being influenced by what might appeal to Wilson executives," Daniel explained. "They've made it clear they want to target the 25-40 demographic more aggressively." Shannon nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you for telling me, Daniel. I appreciate your candor." "What will you do?" he asked. "For now, my job," Shannon replied simply, "while keeping my eyes open." As the day progressed, Shannon maintained her usual schedule, preparing for her evening broadcast with meticulous attention to detail. If anyone expected her to be rattled by the morning's events or the circulating rumors, they would be disappointed. Throughout her career, Shannon had weathered numerous professional storms by focusing on what she could control, the quality of her work. That evening's broadcast proceeded flawlessly, with Shannon delivering a particularly incisive analysis. of a complex international trade dispute. As she wrapped up the final segment, she noticed William Hayes watching from the periphery of the studio, something he rarely did without advance notice. After the broadcast concluded, Hayes approached her. "Excellent work tonight, Shannon. Your explanation of the trade implications was remarkably accessible." "Thank you," Shannon replied, studying his expression for any indication of the rumored discussions. "I find these economic stories often need careful unpacking for viewers." Hayes nodded, then glanced around to ensure they wouldn't be overheard. "I'd like to speak with you tomorrow morning. My office, 9 a.m.? Of course, Shannon agreed, maintaining her composure despite the familiar flutter of concern that such requests typically triggered. In television news, unexpected meetings with network presidents rarely brought positive news. As Shannon gathered her materials, she caught sight of Adam watching their exchange from across the studio, his expression a mixture of curiosity and something that might have been guilt. When he realized she had noticed him, he quickly averted his gaze and busied himself with his phone. That night, as Shannon reviewed the day's events in the quiet of her apartment, she found herself at a familiar crossroads. Throughout her career, she had faced moments where circumstances pushed her to choose between accommodation and assertion, between accepting limitations imposed by others or defining her own boundaries. Each time, after careful consideration, she had chosen the latter, not with dramatic confrontation, but with quiet, unmistakable resolve. As she prepared for bed, her phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "Heard about your meeting with Hayes? Tomorrow. Whatever happens, you've got more support in that building than you know." Shannon smiled at the message, appreciating the sentiment even as she recognized that in the television industry, support often evaporated when careers were at stake. Still, it was a reminder that the impact of her response to Adam's ageist comments had resonated beyond that conference room, creating ripples that continued to spread. Tomorrow's meeting would be another defining moment, perhaps not for her career, which she had built on solid ground, but for how she would shape the narrative of her professional journey moving forward. Age in television news had long been treated as a liability for women, while being celebrated as a source of gravitas for men. Shannon had no intention of accepting that double standard quietly, regardless of what Hayes might say tomorrow. With that thought firmly in mind, Shannon set her alarm and turned out the light, falling asleep with the calm certainty of someone who had faced uncertainty before and emerged stronger for the experience. The morning light filtered through the windows of Shannon Bream's apartment as she prepared for her meeting with William Hayes. Her routine remained unchanged, the same careful selection of a professional outfit, today a tailored navy suit with subtle pinstripes. The same thorough review of overnight news developments. The same quiet moment of reflection before heading into what might prove to be a pivotal day. Shannon had been in the television industry long enough to recognize watershed moments, and this meeting had all the hallmarks. Yet her approach reflected the wisdom acquired through decades of navigating professional challenges, neither assuming the worst nor allowing naive optimism to cloud her judgment. Instead, she prepared for all possibilities, mentally reviewing her accomplishments, ratings trends, and contractual details as she made her way to the network headquarters. The Fox News building hummed with its usual morning energy when Shannon arrived. In the elevator, she encountered Jordan Rodriguez, a technical director who had worked with her on numerous broadcasts. "Morning, Shannon," he greeted her with genuine warmth. "That segment on the trade dispute last night was brilliant. My wife usually leaves the room when economic news comes on, but she actually stayed to watch your explanation." Shannon smiled. "That's the highest compliment a news anchor can receive. Thank you for sharing that." As the elevator doors opened on the executive floor, Jordan offered a parting comment. "Whatever's happening upstairs today, just know that the crew is 100% in your corner." The comment confirmed what Shannon had suspected. Word of her meeting with Hayes had spread throughout the building, along with speculation about its purpose. In the high-stakes environment of television news, such gossip was inevitable. But Shannon found it telling that support was coming from staff at all levels. The relationships she had built over years of treating everyone with equal respect were proving to be not just personally fulfilling, but professionally valuable. Hayes's executive assistant, Catherine Harvey, greeted Shannon with a smile that seemed tinged with sympathy. "He's expecting you," she said, gesturing toward the office door. "Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "I'm fine, thank you," Shannon replied, appreciating the gesture but preferring to enter such meetings unencumbered. William. Hayes rose from behind his desk as Shannon entered, extending his hand in greeting. At 62, he carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected hundreds of careers and millions of viewers. His office reflected his status, spacious and elegantly appointed, with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a commanding view of the Manhattan skyline. "Shannon, thank you for coming," he said, gesturing toward a seating area near the windows rather than the more formal arrangement of chairs facing his desk. This subtle choice suggested a conversation between equals rather than a superior addressing a subordinate, an encouraging sign. "Of course," Shannon replied, taking a seat in one of the leather armchairs. "I appreciate you making time to meet." Hayes settled into the chair opposite hers, his expression thoughtful. "I'll come directly to the point, Shannon. You've undoubtedly heard rumors about potential changes to our programming lineup." "I've heard some whispers," Shannon acknowledged, her tone neutral. "The television landscape is evolving rapidly," Hayes continued. "Streaming services, social media platforms changing viewer habits, all presenting challenges to traditional broadcast models." Shannon nodded, recognizing the familiar preamble that executives often used before delivering difficult news. "Adaptation has always been essential in our industry." "Indeed," Hayes agreed. "And no one has adapted more successfully than you have. Throughout your career," he paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. "Which is why I want to be transparent about developments that may affect your position." "Here it comes," Shannon thought, maintaining her composed exterior while bracing internally for what might follow. "Wilson Media Group is in advanced talks to acquire a 30% stake in the network," Hayes revealed. "Their investment would bring significant capital for expansion, but also comes with certain expectations regarding programming direction." "Including changes to evening anchors?" Shannon asked directly. Hayes's expression confirmed her assumption. "They've expressed interest in what they call refreshing the 7 p.m. slot. Their research suggests that younger viewers are more likely to engage with anchors closer to their own age group." "I see," Shannon replied, her voice even. "And my ratings within that demographic?" "Solid," Hayes admitted. "In fact, stronger than many younger anchors, but Wilson is focused on perception as much as performance. They believe a younger face would send a message about the network's direction." Shannon absorbed this information, recognizing it for what it was: the same double standard she had encountered throughout her career, now packaged in corporate strategic language. "And what do you believe, William?" The question seemed to catch Hayes off guard. After a moment's hesitation, he replied, "I believe you're one of the most valuable journalists on this network. Your legal expertise, your credibility with viewers, your professionalism, all irreplaceable assets. But not enough to override Wilson's preferences," Shannon observed. Hayes sighed. "Media is a business, Shannon. A complicated one with many stakeholders." "Indeed it is," Shannon agreed, "which is why I'd like to share some perspective before any decisions are finalized." Hayes gestured for her to continue, his expression suggesting both respect and curiosity about how she would respond to what essentially amounted to age discrimination dressed up as strategic planning. When I started in this industry, Shannon began, I was told repeatedly that my appearance would determine my success more than my journalistic abilities. That advice wasn't entirely wrong. Television is a visual medium after all, but what those early mentors failed to recognize was that viewers are more discerning than executives often give them credit for. She leaned forward slightly, her posture reflecting confidence rather than defensiveness. Viewers can distinguish between style and substance. They may be initially attracted by production values and aesthetics, but they develop loyalty based on trust. Trust that the person delivering their news understands the complexities behind the headlines. Trust that comes from consistent accuracy and depth of analysis. Hayes nodded, his expression suggesting he was genuinely listening rather than merely waiting for her to finish. You mentioned Wilson's research about younger viewers preferring younger anchors, Shannon continued. But I wonder if they've studied the correlation between anchor age and viewer trust during crisis coverage, or the relationship between perceived expertise and viewer retention during complex news cycles. Those are excellent questions, Hayes acknowledged. The viewers in the 25-40 demographic that Wilson is so eager to capture, they're navigating careers, raising families, making major financial decisions, Shannon noted. They're looking for guidance from someone they perceive as knowledgeable, not just relatable. Youth can project energy, certainly, but experience projects authority. Shannon paused, carefully considering her next words. I'm not suggesting that younger anchors lack value. Quite the opposite. Adam Schmidt, for instance, brings perspectives and approaches that complement our coverage. But replacing experience with youth as a strategy rather than seeking to balance both seems short-sighted, particularly for a network that has built its reputation on credibility. Hayes studied her thoughtfully. You make compelling points, Shannon, points that deserve consideration in these discussions. I appreciate that, Shannon replied. And I understand the pressures you're facing with this potential acquisition. My request is simple. Before any decisions are finalized regarding my position, ensure that Wilson executives have complete information about viewer engagement patterns, not just demographic preferences. Hayes nodded slowly. That's a reasonable request. In fact, he hesitated, then continued. There's something else you should know. The town hall projects you've been planning. Wilson executives will be attending the Nashville event to evaluate our talent firsthand. This revelation clarified much about the recent emphasis on these events. I see. When were you planning to share this information with the planning committee? Next week, Hayes admitted, having the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. The arrangement was just confirmed yesterday. Shannon processed this information quickly, recognizing both the challenge and opportunity it presented. Then it seems we have an excellent chance to demonstrate the value of experience alongside youth. If the Nashville Town Hall succeeds in engaging viewers across demographics, perhaps Wilson might reconsider their assumptions about what drives audience engagement. Perhaps, Hayes agreed, though his tone suggested skepticism. In any case, no decisions will be made until after that event. You have my word on that. As Shannon left Hayes's office, she found Catherine Harvey watching her with undisguised curiosity. Everything all right? The assistant asked. Just fine, Shannon replied, with a genuine smile. Change is part of our business, after all. Rather than returning directly to her office, Shannon took a detour to the research department. If the Nashville Town Hall would indeed be a proving ground, she intended to be fully prepared. The department was buzzing with activity when she arrived, analysts poring over data and producers discussing upcoming segments. Melissa Cooper, the head of research, looked up in surprise when Shannon entered. Shannon, what brings you to our corner of the building? I need comprehensive viewer engagement data for the past year, Shannon explained. Specifically, correlation between anchor demographic factors and viewer trust metrics. Melissa raised an eyebrow. Sounds like you're building a case. Let's call it preparing a thorough analysis, Shannon replied diplomatically. As Melissa gathered the requested reports, Shannon noticed Adam Schmidt in an adjacent conference room, deep in conversation. With Aaron Brooks, the programming director who Daniel had mentioned was pushing for lineup changes. The glass walls allowed Shannon to observe without hearing their discussion, but their body language suggested intense strategizing. When Adam looked up and noticed Shannon watching, his expression shifted from surprise to something more complex. Perhaps discomfort, perhaps guilt. After a moment's hesitation, he excused himself from Brooks and approached Shannon. "I heard about your meeting with Hayes," he said without preamble. "I want you to know I had nothing to do with Wilson's interest in the 7 p.m. slot." Shannon studied him carefully, noting the sincerity in his expression. "But you knew about it." Adam hesitated before nodding. "Brooks mentioned it last week. He suggested I might be considered as a replacement if changes were made." "And what was your response?" Shannon asked, her tone more curious than accusatory. "That I'd be interested in advancing my career," Adam admitted, "but not at the expense of someone who's earned their position through years of excellent work." Shannon found herself reassessing Adam in that moment. His ambition was undeniable, but perhaps there was more substance to him than she had previously recognized. "That's a more principled stance than many would take in your position. Your response to my comments in that meeting, it made me think," Adam explained, "about the kind of career I want to build, about whether success achieved through undermining others is really success at all." Before Shannon could respond, Melissa returned with a thick folder of reports. "Here's everything you requested, plus some additional analytics I thought might be relevant." "Thank you," Shannon said, accepting the folder. To Adam, she added, "The Nashville Town Hall will be attended by Wilson executives. They'll be evaluating all of us, not just me. An opportunity to show what we can accomplish when we collaborate rather than compete." Adam's eyes widened slightly at this information. "I had no idea they'd be there." "Few people do, apparently," Shannon replied. "But now that you know, I hope we can work together to create something that showcases the best of what this network has to offer, including both your fresh perspective and my experience." Adam nodded, a new respect evident in his expression. "I'd like that." As Shannon headed back to her office, folder in hand, she encountered Jennifer Cox and Chelsea Johnson in the corridor, deep in conversation. They fell silent when they noticed her exchanging glances that suggested they'd been discussing her situation. "How did it go with Hayes?" Jennifer asked directly. Shannon considered how much to share, aware that in the network environment, information was currency. "Let's just say that nothing is decided yet, and the Nashville Town Hall has taken on added significance." Chelsea's expression brightened. "Then you still have a chance to show them what they'd be losing." "It's not about me," Shannon corrected gently. "It's about demonstrating that quality journalism transcends demographics, that viewers respond to substance, regardless of the messenger's age." Jennifer nodded thoughtfully. "A rising tide lifts all boats. If you can prove that point, it benefits everyone who prioritizes journalistic integrity over surface appeal." "Exactly," Shannon agreed. "Now, I could use your help reviewing these viewer engagement metrics. If we're going to make a case for experience, it should be backed by data, not just principle." The three women headed to Shannon's office, where they spread the reports across her conference table. For the next 2 hours, they analyzed patterns and highlighted correlations between anchor experience levels and viewer trust during major news events. The findings were revealing. While younger anchors indeed attracted initial viewership from younger demographics, retention rates during complex news stories were significantly higher for experienced anchors across all age groups. During crisis coverage, Natural disasters, terrorist attacks, election nights, viewers of all ages showed marked preference for anchors they perceived as authoritative and knowledgeable. "This is compelling," Jennifer remarked, highlighting a particularly striking chart. "During the last presidential debate coverage, your segment had the highest retention rate among 25 to 34-year-olds, despite having one of the oldest anchors in the time slot. Because you explained the policy implications clearly, without talking down to viewers," Chelsea added. "That's what people respond to, feeling informed rather than just entertained." Shannon was formulating a strategy based on these findings. When her office door opened without a knock, Adam Schmidt stood in the doorway, his expression unusually serious. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, "but there's something you should know." He glanced at Jennifer and Chelsea before continuing. "Brooks just announced that Wilson executives want me to moderate the Nashville Town Hall alone." The implication was clear. Shannon was being sidelined from the very event that was supposed to demonstrate her value to the network. Jennifer reacted immediately, her expression indignant. "That's blatantly unfair. The town hall was Shannon's concept from the beginning." Shannon remained calm, processing this development with the analytical approach that had served her throughout her career. "When did Brooks tell you this?" "Just now," Adam replied. "He wanted me to begin preparation immediately, but..." He hesitated, then continued with resolve. "I told him I wouldn't do it without you, that the event was designed for multiple perspectives and would suffer without your legal expertise." This unexpected show of solidarity surprised all three women. Shannon studied Adam carefully, recognizing the professional risk he had taken. By pushing back against programming directives, what was Brooks's response? Shannon asked. "He wasn't happy," Adam admitted. "Said Wilson specifically requested a demonstration of the network's future direction, but I held firm. Told him the best demonstration would be showing how we can blend experience and fresh perspectives to create something neither could achieve alone." Shannon felt a surge of respect for Adam in that moment, not just for his support, but for his recognition of a fundamental truth about quality journalism. "Thank you, Adam. That couldn't have been an easy position to take." "It was the right position," Adam replied simply. "Now we need to figure out how to make this town hall so compelling that Wilson can't ignore the value of our combined approach." As the four of them began strategizing, Shannon reflected on how dramatically the dynamic had shifted since that confrontational meeting weeks earlier. What had begun as an attempt to diminish her had evolved into an opportunity to demonstrate the power of collaboration across generations, a lesson that extended far beyond their individual careers to address fundamental questions about valuing experience in a youth-obsessed industry. Whether this collaboration would ultimately save, her position remained uncertain, but Shannon found herself focused less on that outcome and more on the principle at stake. In standing firm with dignity rather than bitterness, in mentoring rather than competing, and in valuing substance over superficial appeal, she was already winning a more important victory, changing the narrative about age and experience one conversation at a time. As they finalized their strategy for the Nashville Town Hall, Shannon's phone buzzed with a message from Hayes. "Brooks told me about Schmidt's position on the town hall, impressed by his stance. Perhaps there's merit in your collaboration approach after all. Wilson execs still attending, make it count." Shannon smiled slightly as she read the message. The door that had seemed to be closing on her career was still open, if only slightly, and sometimes a slight opening was all that was needed to demonstrate the enduring power of wisdom, grace, and the quiet strength that comes from knowing your own value.